Hi, I'm Quentin Schultz, the co-author of the book An Essential Guide to Interpersonal Communication. An Essential Guide to Interpersonal Communication. The subtitle of the book helps you understand what it's about: building great relationships with faith, skill, and virtue in the age of social media. Okay, so that's the book. Diane Badzinski and I are the authors, and in these 9 videos, 8 chapters plus the concluding chapter of the book, I lay out a little bit from each chapter of the book, just a little bit, and give you a taste of what's in the book and also encourage you to get the book. But I think you'll learn some great things in the book, and it's going to be worth your while. So I'm Quentin Schultz. As you can see here, my contact information, quentinschultz.com. Feel free to get in touch with me. We're going to talk about Chapter 8, Restore Relationships, to restore them. So that suggests that relationships get to the point where they've gone down somehow. They're not as good, as strong. People are not flourishing. How can we restore them? Or maybe they're desperately, badly broken, and we need to patch them up somehow. This happens too. Well, let me tell you about somebody that I held a grudge against for nearly my entire life. And only 10 years ago, I forgave. That person was my father. My father was an alcoholic. He died just as I was beginning high school. And it was very, very difficult to grow up in the situation with him. And he was physically and verbally abusive. In fact, at night, I shared a bedroom with my mother, and at night, my mother and I, as the sun would start to go down, would go in that bedroom, close the door, and we had a chest we put between the door and the closet wall so my father couldn't break the door down and get in there. And I would get under the sheets and pull the blankets up over my head and put a pillow over my ears so I wouldn't hear him yelling to get in the room and yelling terribly nasty things, describing my mother, and would go on until he got so drunk that he just passed out somewhere. This was night after night after night, and that's partly what I grew up with. It was a difficult time. And I never can say that I actually loved my father. I never had the kind of relationship with him where I could love him and so forth. But as I got older, I realized more and more, talking to I have 2 significantly older brothers, and talking with them and other people, that my father went through his own difficulties. In many respects, what happened with him and the cause for his drinking and his alcoholism and the difficulties in his life, including difficulties with his wife, a paranoid schizophrenic, and all of this stuff, failed business. I began to sympathize with him, maybe even empathize a little bit, and I ended up in counseling. And I've had a psychiatrist for years, also a separate counselor, and the counselor said to me one day, I think you finally need to address that relationship with your father. I think you can do it now, and you really need to forgive him, and you need to tell him that you've done well in spite of that. And I got to thinking about that, and I think he's right. So I took a few weeks and I wrote out a forgiveness letter, which told him, "It's okay, Dad. I turned out okay, and I do forgive you. Those are difficult times," and so on. And I took that letter and went to his gravesite in Chicago, and bawling, crying almost uncontrollably, I read it to him. It was good to forgive him. It took me a long time. I don't know how to say I restored that relationship, given he is not with us any longer. But I can tell you that it was something that I needed to do, and it was the right thing to do, and that God wants us to restore our relationships. And the number one thing that gets in the way is hurt, and hurt requires forgiveness, to make amends. That's what I'm going to be talking about for this chapter 8, Restore Relationships. It's always possible. It's never too late, okay? So there are relational seasons we go through. Our relationships are continuously growing or dying. Seemingly stagnant relationships become, they go stagnant. Sometimes they seem to grow a little bit. They go back down. The stagnant ones might be waiting for conditions for growth. Stagnant relationships. Say, boy, I haven't had coffee with that person for a while, or haven't gotten together with that person, or I'd sure like to see that person. Something stagnant to work on, to develop. But some relationships will die regardless of what we do. We just have to accept that. There are times when you say, why are they getting divorced? Or what happened to that great friendship? Or we say to ourselves, how did I let that friendship die? That was one of my closest friends. Or why did I never seek forgiveness? Or vice versa. What happened there? Sometimes they die. There are seasons here, the ups and the downs, and understanding the seasons is important. Also, all of our relationships have a kind of honeymoon period up front, right? We meet somebody and say, boy, they could be a great friend, or somebody say, I'm going to ask them out on a date, but that initially there is a kind of anticipation, sometimes even excitement with a new relationship, as well as trepidation. Oh boy, I don't know how far I want to go with this. It might not last. It might not be good. Bad things might happen here. I could get hurt, and so on. But it's in those early stages of a relationship where we can look at them amidst the trepidation with the excitement, the hope, and begin working on the relationship, putting some effort in, seeking to make that relationship something that will become wonderful, rich, and rewarding, where we can both flourish. And we can think about this in our relationship with God, with other people, and with ourselves. Sometimes we give up on ourselves, or we give up on God, and we need to restore those relationships as well. There's honeymoons, and then we move on from there. But we invariably hurt others. We all do. We can't get around it. We are going to hurt others, and we are hurt. It is going to happen. Emotional hurts deliver us to our original tendencies. As cocooners are hiding, we hide to avoid the hurt and criticize. We deal with the hurt by criticizing, which is often going to make it worse. So these two early things, the Adam and Eve sins, if you will, that we inherit, that we carry with us in our relationships, come in, and hurt takes place. Do you see this in your own life? I see it in my life all the time. I am hurting people, and I am hurt. Sometimes I'm hurt in ways that are so ridiculous. I send someone a text message, and it's important to me what's in the message, but it might not be as important to them, and I don't hear from them for 4 or 5 days, and I feel hurt. Hey, that person doesn't love me anymore, or maybe they're angry with me about something, and this is what we get into. So hurt happens, both us hurting others and them hurting us. And, the question is, what do we do about it? What do we do? Well, we want to seek forgiveness. Mutual forgiveness is the route to restored relationships. Mutual forgiveness. None of us is perfect. We have to express our hurts in love, and we have to forgive as God forgives us. We simply have to do it. Forgiveness is the way to restore relationships, the primary way. Forgiveness is an incredible gift. What a thing when you think about it. Why aren't we so driven in our fallenness as human beings, our lack of kindness, our nastiness, our impatience and the like? Why aren't we driven just to destroy relationships and move on to others, and destroy them and move on to others? Why do we keep the door open for any forgiveness at all? This is grace. This is grace. I think every time human beings forgive themselves, it's a sign that points to the great forgiveness that God has for us. Now, we like in the book, Diane, my co-author, and I like to put little charts and diagrams and so forth. There are a lot of them in there to help you. You can copy them and share them with others and talk about them and discuss them and apply them in your life. And so in this particular chapter on restoring relationships, we have from the book by Everett Worthington a little REACH acronym here for steps for forgiveness that are quite nice. So we recall the hurt. We need to know hurt, identify that hurt, describe it. Yeah, I was hurt by that. Okay, that's hurt. Second, to empathize with the wrongdoer. In other words, we could have been the one that hurt us, right? We could have turned it around. We could have been the one. In fact, we have been the one. We've hurt others. So we empathize with that begins to open us up some to the possibility of forgiveness. Third, altruistically offer forgiveness. Altruistically, without conditions. We go to that person if we can in person, or if we can't do it that way, we do it through email or a call on the phone, maybe better, and we offer forgiveness. Next, the C, we commit publicly to forgive. Now, don't get too confused by this commit publicly. It means it's not just between us and that other person. The value of this forgiveness is to show and demonstrate it with others as well. Not to build ourselves up that we were so great to forgive someone, but to keep forgiveness alive and to encourage others in forgiveness. So we may have a close friend or a spiritual director or advisor or whatever that we explain that we were really estranged from this person because of the hurt, and we went to them and it was good, and that person will say to us, I'm so glad you did that. I need to do that with some people as well. So we commit to forgive in order to continue the forgiveness going, and we keep it as a whole approach to life, to be a person of forgiveness who lives in forgiveness, not just this one situation. We publicly commit to it and live it out. And then lastly, the H, we hold on to forgiveness. We hold on to it. We don't go back and revisit the hurt. No, we've offered forgiveness. We move on from there. We might remember the hurt on occasion, but at that moment we should remind ourselves of the forgiveness as well in order to know what the story is. It's a story of forgiveness. REACH by Everett Worthington. Sometimes we forgive indirectly. This is important to realize. We do it, we don't know what we're doing, but other people will do it. To recognize other people indirectly forgiving us is so great, because then we can move the process along. And when I looked at the academic scholarly literature on this, I was amazed at how many people find it so difficult to directly go and ask for forgiveness, but will instead do it indirectly. Sometimes people reconcile by slowly acting differently rather than by using words directly to seek or grant forgiveness. So their deeds act in a sense as words to begin the forgiveness and restoration process. So you might find somebody that starts treating you differently. And boy, there was a problem with that relationship, and all of a sudden they're recognizing you. They were ignoring you before, giving you the cold treatment. And they're recognizing you now, or they're saying hello to you or asking you how you're doing. Why are they doing that? This is somebody that hurt me, and they're doing that. They might ask you to coffee. Say, what is going on here? These little steps, these baby steps, perhaps toward direct forgiveness, but maybe not. But they are signs that that other person, in fact, is moving toward restoring the relationship. And we should, by all means, encourage them and not push for or expect, at least not expect immediately, full reconciliation. Indirect forgiveness. It's a gift. We've all done it, we've all accepted it, and we should encourage it. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis. To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable. Why? Because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. Isn't that our situation? God has forgiven us, and so we forgive others. And it's not a matter of what's excusable and what's not. It's not a matter of making our forgiveness dependent on this or that or another thing. If God did that with us, we would all be in deep trouble. So we turn to forgiveness. We seek forgiveness. We offer forgiveness. We accept forgiveness because it's so healing. It's a sign of God's grace in the world. Now, can we practice this in today's uncivil world? Wow, I sometimes wonder, can we? There is so much criticism, so many relationships falling apart, so much nastiness, so many people that don't seem to want to have good relationships. They seem more to want to tear down others. It's sad, but it's there. We have to contend with it. Can we practice real forgiveness? We can. In our limited sphere that we have of people, starting with those closest to us and those we know we need to practice forgiveness, we can do that by God's grace. So I've been talking about chapter 8 in Restore Relationships is the title of the chapter. My name is Quentin Schultz. My co-author is Diane Badzinski. The book is titled An Essential Guide to Interpersonal Communication. And we hope you'll get a copy and read it. And this is chapter 8, the second to the last chapter. Well, the last regular chapter. I'm going to have a video here shortly on the last section of the book, which is the conclusion about forming friendships and what God thinks about friendships and what we can do to practice really great friendships. Get a copy of the book if you're willing, please, and read through it. And then go to my website and send Diane and myself a note there to encourage us to continue on. Meanwhile, seek forgiveness, offer forgiveness, accept it, restore relationships, experience that shalom, that real peace in your life. It's all a gift from God. Thank you.